Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Tuscaloosa Tourism and Sports.
All right, man. I tell you, if you want a barometer of how fast time flies by, just do Tider Insider TV. I'm serious. You know, there's 52 Tuesdays in a year. I think we do shows either 50 or 51 of them. And it's a good thing. But we're up here on Tuesday, Rodney, and you snap your fingers, it seems like we're back again. Sure. And just that quickly, spring ball is over. And we're getting ready for fall before you know it. All right, welcome in to TITV alongside Rodney Orr from TiderInsider.com. I'm WVUA 23 Sports Director Gary Harris, and we've got a A-Day recap. There's only one practice that we get to watch during the spring, and that's the A-Day game. And it was held this past Saturday, wrapping up the spring football season. Now, the Crimson team took down the white team by a score of 30-21 on Saturday afternoon inside Bryant-Denny Stadium. By the way, Rodney, people were talking about the turf. That was the last game on the turf. They're putting brand new turf in again for the fall. But a lot of unknowns going into the game. Some questions may have been answered. Some others we probably, quite frankly, won't answer until really closer to the season. And one of those questions is who's going to be the starting quarterback. More on that in a moment. But, Rodney, there were highlights. Malachi Moore was the Dixie Howell most valuable player. 9 tackles, 3 sacks. Yeah, I'd say he's back after what was kind of an off year last year. You had Kool-Aid, Earl Little Jr., Caleb Downs in that secondary. Those linebackers, man, they were running around making plays. In that running back room, it might be as good as there is in America. But again, Rodney, the biggest question is at quarterback. That was actually a good throw by Ty Simpson. Earl Little made an unbelievable play. But I don't know really, Rod, and you maybe you do. I don't feel like I know any more about who's going to be the starting quarterback coming out of this game than I did going into it or going into spring practice.
You know what, Gary? I thought the 8A game went exactly as we had heard all spring long from the very start of spring. We've been saying it every Tuesday night right here. The quarterbacks have been inconsistent. That's been the key word, is that they have been inconsistent. I thought in this game, obviously, they made some big plays. You saw the throw from Milroe there to Emmanuel Henderson, and what a player he might be. But, Gary, you know, when you look at it overall, and I know it's the number one question. Everybody wants to talk about the quarterbacks. Right now, I just don't think there's much more to say.
All right, there are other, and we'll watch some video from the quarterbacks here that we got in pregame prior to A-Day. Obviously, you know, that's the straw that stirs the drink. I mean, that's the quarterback. That's where everything builds around offense. But there are other, we mentioned the running backs, man. Whoever the quarterback is, he's going to have 5 really top-tier backs to hand off to. Wide receivers got a lot of young talent, and some guys like Ja'Cory Brooks that have proven themselves. That offensive line, though, needs to take a step in, you know, the right direction, be a little more physical than they were a year ago. What did you see from them?
Look, I'm very impressed, not only with the first team group, Gary, but those 5 freshmen they put out there. You could see the reps that they got this spring were really very good for them, for their development. But those guys are really talented. I mean, those young players. I think as a group, this is pretty impressive, the job that Eric Wolford's done so far. I think, like you said, they're going to be the group that kind of sets the tone. Very impressed.
On defense, a lot of new faces. I got to tell you, Rod, we sat next to each other in the press box. I said, man, listen, there's Justin Eboigbe. Boy, good to have him back. I said, you know, with Freddie Roach and these different defensive coaches starting up front on the defensive line, if you can't get good play out of those guys, then you're going to have to look at what you're doing, because they go 9 or 10 or 11 deep with good-looking defensive linemen in terms of athletic ability and size.
Yeah, I mean, when you start looking at it, you mentioned Justin Eboigbe. We saw him just a minute ago. Jaheim Otis, Tim Smith. You know, some guys, young players are really starting to step up. Monkel Goodwine's a guy that stepped up. Tim Keenan's done some things this spring. We could go on and on and on. Jordan Renaud's a young freshman. James Smith is a guy that we think will be a contributor as a true freshman. There's a lot of guys, and not mentioning all of them, but, yeah, I think this has a chance to be a really good defensive front. And you know what, Gary? I think the inside backers were extremely impressive, too. And even the backup outside guys, when you look at Keanu Koo, and on one side, I thought he was very, very impressive with what he did. I think, too, some of the other young guys, whether it's Quay Russaw, a lot of guys with a lot of talent. Quandarius Robinson, we haven't mentioned him enough, actually.
Yeah, he looked great.
Yeah.
He's always had the athletic ability. He's added size. What is he, about 6'5", probably up to about 235 or so?
He's gotten thicker.
Yeah.
And again, you start looking at the depth that they're going to have when Dallas Turner gets back, Chris Raswell gets back. On the inside, Deontay Lawson. I was really impressed, not only with Trez Marshall, the transfer, but what about Justin Jefferson?
He can run.
Very disruptive.
And I'll tell you this, the defense needs to be better. And I'll be shocked if it isn't. I mean, for one thing, have a veteran like Kevin Steele leading the defense, but man, again, the athleticism, the size, the speed, it's there. You just got to go out and play. All right, Rodney, we can't get away from the quarterback question. As we said, we don't know who the quarterback is going to be, and there is a possibility that there could be another quarterback that's in the mix. There are reports tonight that Tyler Buchner is going to visit Alabama and may even be here now. And this is a guy from Notre Dame who Tommy Rees recruited out of high school. I talked to a sportscaster friend of mine in San Diego. I sent you the text, Rodney. He said he's the best high school quarterback he's ever seen. And said even better than Julian Sayin, who's really high on as well, who's an Alabama commit. But Tyler Buchner started out as the starter last year, hurt his shoulder, still passed for over 600 yards, and then came back in that Tax Slayer Bowl against South Carolina. And even though he threw 3 interceptions, I think he accounted for 5 or 6 touchdowns, as we're watching some video from that. And Notre Dame came back and won that game. All right, what do you make of this developing story?
Well, first of all, he's very athletic, and let's be clear. Now, he threw those interceptions. Gary, he missed almost 4 months of playing time because of that shoulder injury that you mentioned. So he was kind of rusty in this game. But let me say this about him. You know, again, he's got till May 15th to make all these guys that hit the transfer portal. They have till May 15th. He could end up back at Notre Dame. It doesn't necessarily mean because he's visiting that he's coming to Alabama.
Right.
I'll say this, too, now. Sometimes you have to protect yourself, because you could lose a player at that position. And if you do, you better have somebody as an insurance policy to back them up. So I'm not saying that with Buchner, but, you know, let's see how it unfolds.
Yeah. And he may visit other schools, including Auburn.
Exactly.
So we'll definitely keep an eye on that for you. All right, now it's time for Coach Talk. Following Saturday's 8A game, Alabama head coach Nick Saban, of course, spoke with the media, and he was asked about experience. You know, how big an advantage is it to have guys that have been in your program? Coach says, yeah, experience is important, but you know what? He wants guys that will do their job. That's most important, regardless of whether you're a freshman or a senior. You got to be able to do your job.
It has everything to do with accountability. And are you dependable to go out there and do your job? Whether a good thing happens or a bad thing happens, you got to play the next play. So, you know, we use all these things as learning experiences so guys do grow and develop the kind of maturity they need so that they can play in difficult circumstances. And obviously guys with experience should be able to do that better, but they have to prove that they can do it just like the young guys do.
Rod, I love that because that's the way it's always been since he's been here in 2007. Yeah, you know, you've been around, but he's going to play the best guys. And even when Alabama was really starting the dynasty and they were coming, oh, man, all these recruits who'd want to go to Alabama, he said, you know what? If you come in and you're a freshman, you're better than the guy who's a 2-year starter ahead of you, you're going to play. And it is. Regardless, experience should help. But if you don't do your job, experience ain't going to help you get on the field, right?
Exactly. And I think, Gary, when we look at it this spring, I mean, I don't know what you thought, but I think I know what you thought. Was there not a lot of competition? I mean, there was a lot of competitiveness.
Everywhere.
I look at those DBs, man. Listen, you don't think coaching's important? Let me tell you. I saw a lot of effort.
I did too.
You know, obviously there's a lot of talent. Earl Little makes that play on that dive. That's effort. That's coaching. You've got to get it out of the players, and I think that's what we're starting to see.
Yeah, and a lot of young guys. You mentioned Little, other newcomers or guys that haven't been in the program very long that impressed you Saturday.
Yeah, look, I thought Antonio Kite made some plays at corner. He's a young redshirt freshman. I thought Des Ricks made some plays. Now, again, do you get burned every now and then? Yeah, that's going to happen. But you see the competitiveness out there. How about Caleb Downs? How about Justice Haynes on the other side of the ball?
I mean, both those guys are good as advertised. I'm pumped up, too, for these newcomers.
And the offensive linemen, we could go down the list. Caden Proctor, Wilkin Formby, Miles McVay, all those guys.
You know, it reminds me a little bit of 2008. And he was building the program then. I get it, coming off 7-6 his first year. But you knew some of that young talent was going to come in here and make a difference. I feel the same way about this team.
Well, I think that's a great point, Gary, because I think as we kind of look at the roster right now, I think it's the last two classes. This class they just brought in and the one before that you really see that. I think these last two classes are the ones that are going to help Alabama get back to where they want to be.
Yeah, and continuing to build for the future, too. Alabama football picked up its sixth commitment last Friday for the class of 2024 when four-star linebacker Caden Jones picked the Crimson Tide. He chose Bama over the likes of USC, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Notre Dame, and Michigan. As a junior, he tallied 50 tackles with a pair of sacks and was a huge part of his high school's offense as well. Because he's a tight end, so he's versatile. The 6'4", 210-pound junior at Christ School in Arden, North Carolina, grew up an Alabama fan, and it's the offer that young Mr. Jones wanted all along. So when he got it, it was Roll Tide all the way.
I was just an Alabama guy, like I just love Alabama, like the way they played, and I always loved watching them. And honestly, if Alabama would have offered me first, I probably wouldn't have had all the other offers, I probably, would have just committed, and they were my last offer. And so it's been a nice process.
That was cool. If Alabama offered me first, I probably would have went ahead and closed it out. What do you know about this young man?
Well, first of all, you mentioned a lot of it, Gary. You look at the height. He's got the frame to get bigger. He's very athletic. And you know what? Nick Saban's always done a great job of getting players who are versatile to play other positions. I mean, listen, I think he's going to be a linebacker. We think that. But how about Cameron Latu? He came in as an outside linebacker, ended up a tight end, and a really good one's going to go in the NFL draft. So, with that said, it's his versatility. All
right, he wants to get to Alabama and then probably to the NFL. Most of them do. We're about to have another surge of Bama players going into the National Football League. The draft begins on Thursday night. Alabama will have 3 players in Kansas City for the draft. Quarterback Bryce Young, outside edge rusher Will Anderson Jr., and defensive back Brian Branch will all be in attendance and are projected to go in the first round. In fact, we think Bryce will be the #1 overall pick by the Carolina Panthers. There's a chance Will Anderson Jr. could go as early as number 2 to Houston, so you could have 1-2. Also, Jahmyr Gibbs might slide into that first round as well. And so Alabama, once again, over 40 first-round picks since Nick Saban got here, going to have 3 or 4 more and probably the #1 overall pick. And, Rod, real quick thought on Bryce. Of all the great players that have come through here, he's got a chance to make history.
Yeah. Amazing. You know what, Gary? What a career in 3 years. Won a national championship, won a Heisman Trophy, won an SEC championship, and played for another national championship, and now probably the #1 pick.
Yeah, we'll be watching all those guys on Thursday night in Kansas City, and the draft will continue through the weekend. Well, still to come on Tider Insider Television, Alabama basketball landed 2 new transfers from the portal. We'll have that for you. And Crimson Tide basketball, in the portal, and Alabama baseball sweeping Missouri in an outstanding performance on the road over the weekend. Plus, your phone calls, emails, and tweets. We'll be getting to those coming up a little bit later on in the show. TITV will return right after this. And welcome back to TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. Well, former Shelton State basketball player Jaquan Walton was planning on transferring from Wichita State to Alabama. But on Saturday night, he was arrested, charged with second-degree possession of marijuana. They also found a loaded firearm under his seat, and he was released on $500 bond. But Nate Oates put out a statement saying that Alabama is no longer recruiting Walton and that he won't be a part of the Alabama program. But Alabama did pick up 2 big portal additions in terms of commitments. Latrell Reitzel is a guard out of Cal State Fullerton, about 6'3", all first-team Big West, 16.3 points, 4.5 rebounds, 2.4 assists. And this is the thing, because the Tide also got Aaron Estrada from Hofstra. He started out at St. Peter's, went to Oregon, 20.2 points, 5.5 rebounds, 4.3 assists. So not only can these guys score at 6'3", they can also rebound and dish it out as well. Nate Oates understands how this works. The roster turns over every year. You've got to be able to use the portal, and Alabama getting a couple of good veteran guards to join this team next year. And so Alabama basketball, Rodney, real quick thought on that. You're not going to have Walton coming in, but those 2 guards, like I said, they're only, I say only, tall by normal standards, but about 6'3". But their versatility and their ability to score, you're always looking for that.
Yeah, and you can see they're physical.
Yeah.
I mean, they're built. I think they can, certainly play inside when they can certainly muscle their way in. But, Gary, look, this is something that we've talked about. You're going to have to get accustomed to it. The roster is going to turn over. The job they've done, especially when you consider the coaches that they lost, pretty amazing.
Yeah, let's move on. Alabama baseball, man, what a difference a couple of weeks can make. Alabama, after losing that first game at home against Auburn, was 4-9 in the SEC. They went on to win the last 2 against Auburn. Then they sweep Missouri and Columbia this weekend. They're now 9-9 in the league, 29-12 overall. They're facing Sanford tonight at home, then go to LSU this weekend. This Bama baseball team now, I was talking about Can they make a regional? They may wind up hosting if they keep playing like this. Alabama softball, though, not as good a weekend at home against rival Auburn. Auburn was in town for the first time since 2017. Alabama won game one of the series, but lost the last two. Disappointing to lose at home to Auburn. Alabama goes as at home this weekend against LSU. They got two series left, LSU and at Ole Miss. They need to finish well here to make sure they host a regional and stay in that top 16. Well, still to come on TITV, Alabama men's golf makes it to the quarterfinals of the SEC Championship. And up next, your phone calls, emails, and tweets. Your phone number, as always, 205-348-9882. I understand we already got some callers lined up. We'll get to you next when TITV returns here on WVUA 23. Alabama men's golf really played well over at the SEC Championships in Sea Island, Georgia. The Tide advanced to the match play portion of the tournament where they lost to number one ranked Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt went on to the final and lost to Florida, but Alabama looked good. Now the Tide getting ready for the NCAA regionals, which begin the weekend of May 15th. And this Alabama men's golf team looks really, really strong. All right, welcome back into TITV with Rodney Orr. I'm Gary Harris. We're going to jump right out on the phones and welcome in Sammy from Walker County. Hey, Sammy.
Hey, Gary. Hello, Rodney. Great job, guys. And I just want to get y'all's take on this. Do y'all think Malachi Moore will slide into the old Brian Branch position? And also, is Jason McClellan, will he be the lead back? Do you think? I know the competition's stiff, but thanks, guys.
All right, Sammy, Rodney, what you think about those two questions?
You know, really, I think right now, I think there's a pretty good chance you could see Earl Little at that starting star. Now, with Malachi Moore, you know, we've seen him play at safety. Of course, now he formerly did play really well at the star position. So, Sammy, I think it's still open, but yeah, watch Earl Little at that star spot.
Jace McClellan. Will he be the starting running back?
Look, they've got four really good ones. I think Jace is probably the number one guy because of seniority, because he's been around a while. Not just because of seniority, because he's a really talented player. But, yeah, what a group they've got.
All right, let's get to our email of the day, and it is brought to you by KDM Service Corporation. KDM Service Corporation serving your family like our family. For all your heating and air conditioning needs, it's KDM Service Corporation. Let's get to that email. It's from Larry in Birmingham. Why is Alabama's quarterback situation such a mess? Well, Larry, all right, I understand fans can get frustrated. I don't think it's a mess. First of all, so I'm going to disagree with your premise. I do think that it has unanswered questions, and I think that frustrates fans. They want to know who the quarterback's going to be, but they got four talented quarterbacks on scholarship, might add another one in the portal. So I don't think it's a mess, but I do think it's uncertain.
Well, I think fans have gotten used to this string of quarterbacks that they've had, and you really haven't had any concerns going into a season. But, you know, they've got a lot of young talent back there. I mean, obviously it's inexperience. I think that's the big key, Gary. It's the inexperience that they have heading into the season.
All right, thanks for the phone calls and emails. We're going to have more phone calls and emails when this edition of TITV returns. There's the phone number, 205-348-9882. We'll be right back after this. All right, Rodney, you know what happens the Monday night following the spring game, the annual steak and beans dinner. The winners, the Crimson team, chowed down on steak with all of the trimmings. But I said this on the Sports Tonight, don't feel too sorry for the white team. I'm telling you, the beans and franks that they are in the bread, it's really not bad. Those beans and franks are pretty tasty, but obviously big ribeyes with loaded baked potato, salad, chocolate cake. You'd prefer to munch on that, but hey, to the victor goes the spoils, right?
Yeah, hey, listen, I understand that one of the losing players tried to sneak in a piece of that chocolate cake, Gary.
Not happening.
It didn't work.
No, Saban's watching for that. All right, welcome back in. We're going to jump right back out on the phones because we're getting tight on time. Wayne is over in Pell City. Hey, good evening, Wayne.
Hey, how you doing, Gary?
Doing great.
Listen, just a question. I just kind of concerns me a little bit that we're looking at the transfer portal for a quarterback, and we've got four quality quarterbacks that just a snap or two away from being great.
Yeah, Wayne, I think Rodney made a great point earlier. It doesn't mean that he's coming. Alabama's visiting with him, and they'll make a decision. He'll have to make a decision. But I just think you always look to make your team better.
Look, most programs want to have five guys on scholarship at the quarterback position. That's ideal if you can have five guys, okay? Alabama has four right now. Now, that doesn't happen very often these days because the way the quarterbacks move. Remember a couple of years ago, Alabama only had three. But so, I don't get too upset about this. Nick Saban is always looking for an edge to make his team better. If he feels like he needs to bring in another quarterback, then that's what he'll do.
All right, real quickly, we're going to get to Steve in Trussville. Hey, Steve, got about a minute.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
In my opinion, I was at the game Saturday, and I don't think it matters who they got at quarterback. From what I saw at left tackle, he was beat on pass protection pretty much the whole game, and we wasn't even playing our best pass rushers.
Yeah, Steve, I'll let Rodney pick up because you're right. He struggled.
Look, Elijah Pritchett did struggle, at left tackle. Now, he's a young player, obviously. But let me tell you what, Steve, I don't know if you watched the other left tackle or not, number 74, but he's a mountain. He's a mountain, and I think he's really going to compete. Caden Proctor at that left tackle position. Again, we talked about all those freshmen.
And let's not give up on Pritchett yet.
No.
I mean, he did something during the spring to get that first-team slot.
Right, and Proctor is going to compete.
Yeah.
That's the point.
Yeah.
And you look at him, I thought he did a really good job.
Yeah, but Pritchett struggled, and he'll need to tighten that up. All right, thanks for all the phone calls and emails. A beautiful evening in Tuscaloosa, and we'll be back to wrap up TITV right after this. All right, love getting to report this story. Former Alabama golfer Davis Riley got his first victory on the PGA Tour this past Sunday at the Zurich Classic of New Orleans. He got it with some help from his good buddy Nick Hardy. Hardy played at Illinois, and Davis, of course, at Alabama, but they played junior golf together. They combined to shoot 30 under par. Now, this is a team event, the only partner event on the PGA Tour, but look at that putt Davis made. But you get full privileges for winning the event. So you're exempt for the next 2 years, plus they split, I think, Rodney, they split like $2.4 million. So about $1.2 million apiece. And just great news for Davis Riley, another Alabama golfer winning on the PGA Tour. And both those guys will get a lot of benefits from being exempt for the next 2 years. All right, that is going to do it for this edition of Tider Insider TV. And we'll be back again next week. For Rodney Orr, I'm Gary Harris. A reminder that you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 here on WVUA 23 as we leave you with some video from the Walk of Fame ceremony at Denny Chimes. And you can also find it anytime at WVUA23.com. So watch TITV on the replay and also at WVUA23.com. All right, that's going to do it for the show. Have a great night. We'll talk to you again next week on Tider Insider TV.